heart.
And pint-sized Patron. This is Fresh Juice every Wednesday. It's Trilltopia.
You know you can't get enough of Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio.world, your community election connection. 2020, engage and activate. Rainier Avenue Radio, we've done, I don't know, maybe 15 different debates on all the various down ballot candidates that were running this year. We talked about Referendum 90. And there's an election coming up on November 21st. The NAACP is electing a president. This is important to our community. And part of what we are doing is providing our community with an opportunity to hear from the candidates. We're also going to be hosting a debate on Friday from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, where we will drill down more specifically on some of the issues that we are aware of and could be a concern to you as community members. But you also need to have the opportunity to just hear from the candidates. Find out who they are, find out what their interests are. And that's what we're providing for you. We've talked to Carolyn Riley Payne. If you're just joining us, we just talked to Mr. Erwin Chappelle. You'll be able to go back and review these on our Facebook page, and we're also going to put them on our archives for all of our streaming audiences listening as well. And right now, I would like to welcome Mr. Deaunte Damper. Deaunte, how are you?
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Yeah, great.
Deaunte, let's get started. And again, I'm going to want to talk to you and just find out about how you are and what you've been doing and some of your thoughts. But let's start again with the role of the NAACP. How do you see the NAACP playing a role in our local communities? What should that role be?
Yes. Well, NAACP has been a civil rights organization, or the biggest civil rights organization out here nationally since 1909. And I think the mission is very clear, just to advocate for the spaces, for inclusivity and social justice for people of color. And I think that especially in this climate, I think that we have so many amazing organizations that are out there, but I think that one thing that has been forgotten is that we have created the manual. So our mission statement is to continue that manual of fighting for civil rights and social justice, but also create more of an impact. I think that throughout this year, we've been very silent on certain things that have impacted the community, and they needed our voice. I think that we could have been a soundboard to stop a lot of situations before they occurred, or to advocate when we should have. And I think that the mission for the NAACP should be in the spaces of making sure that we keep on letting community know that we are the matriarchs of civil rights.
And let's talk about you a little bit, Deaunte. You're native Seattleite. Where'd you grow up? Just share with us, man, a little bit about your background. Let folks get to know you a little bit.
Absolutely. See, Erwin Chappelle spoke earlier. He said he's from the CD, but see, I'm from the south end of Seattle. I grew up out here in Columbia City my whole life up until, I'll flashback because we usually talk about the high schools that we graduated from, but I love giving people some history, especially people who just moved here. I graduated middle school from African American Academy, and I went to Franklin for a minute. It was great to be a Quaker, but nothing felt better than graduating with Rainier Beach High School. So I am Rainier Beach class of 2004. Throughout those times, I lived in DC, Philadelphia, over the years. And I think that living in Philadelphia is where my social justice started. As people know that I am an openly positive male, And once I was able to get the compass of navigating my civil rights, when we talk about HIV, we don't really, it's always taught through a white lens. We don't really have we haven't had very many strong Black, queer, positive activists in the space. So that's one of the things that I started to do, especially when I moved back home, because I found a home in Spokane, one of the longest running nonprofits out here, where I worked as a peer mentor and also helped them set up their first ever Pacific Northwest Pride, which I'm still on the planning committee for. And I think that doing that work, I started to see that there was an impact in the jails. So then I started advocating in the jails, advocating for Black and brown bodies that have been incarcerated from local to federal, from federal court cases. I've advocated for creating service plans for Black and brown individuals in our community, and actually working on a case that I just could not. I had a hard time working on a specific case, and I went to the NAACP. Shout out to Terry Rogers Camp and Sade Smith, because taking some of their criminal justice classes that they had on the weekends, it actually helped me advocate to get that young brother out. But it also taught me that the NAACP was completely silent on LGBTQ issues. And I guess that's the first part of the story, I guess. But there's more.
And again, just sharing some information about you and your journey. What are some of the things that Deaunte Damper enjoys doing? Has fun for relaxation, to chill or
relaxation. What do I do? I think. Oh, and I left out a really big part of my story, Tony. You gonna let me leave out this?
No, go ahead. Take your time.
I actually started doing stand-up comedy. What year was that? 2012. And I think that was still making people laugh. I actually was hosting a radio show called Got Funny earlier this year. And I also was the Columbia City Theater's first ever, I won the first ever comedy competition there in that space. So I think comedy, what else? I think it's just, honest to God, right now I'm watching The Queen's Gambit on Netflix. So I think just binge watching a couple things on Netflix when I do have those quiet moments. And also I think it's just, throughout this year, I think I've learned what friendships look like, authentic friendships really look like, especially in the midst of the pandemic. So being around genuine people that really show up for you, I think that's what I love to do in my spare time.
Deaunte, that kind of segues into the next question that I have for you is, again, I'm sure that you are aware that over the course of, again, beginning on May 30th, the protests, which in some instances turned into riots, and then activism. Seattle was on the national spotlight. A lot of things happened, and depending on how you look at it, a lot of things didn't happen. In some instances, there was a vacuum of leadership, and when that happened, certain groups, certain entities, certain people, certain individuals stepped up to fill that vacuum, whether you agreed with their ideology, their philosophy, or not. There were also voices that were silent during that time when there was clearly a need for leadership, whatever that leadership may have been. And that's subjective to whatever anybody's, thoughts are on what leadership looks like. And this was on the grassroots level. This was through our elected officials. For you, when you look back at that particular time, that not only was there a revelation among some folks that there was this thing called systemic oppression and how that impacted and affected, in particular, Black people and people of color. That during this time, when there were issues that were exacerbated, like the economy, like education, that showed where, again, we essentially lived in two different Americas. And for some people, that was a reality that they were unaware of. What were you thinking? Share with us some of your thoughts about what you liked, what you disliked, what you realized, what you acknowledged about that whole incident. And in particular, I'm wanting to hear your comments on leadership or the lack thereof.
I will say, I think everybody played a great big part in that. But I think if I think about three spaces of leadership, that would be for me. And I think one of the things as community that we have to start paying attention to is how essential our Black media outlets are. The coverage came from Rainier Avenue Radio. It came from the Z-Twins. It came from the Medium. It came from the Facts. It came from Seattle Emerald. I will honestly say one of the media sites that is like that has really been a catalyst in actually bringing truth, speaking truth to power, and exposing some of the things that were going on that we didn't have a lens for was Converge Media. I think that when it comes to our community orgs, I think that we did a great job with trying to find the resource, because we all played a part. Every organization played a part. I think that we were a little bit more silent on where we stood with a lot of things.
We meaning who?
Oh, we as in the NAACP King County. I think that we are watching majority of people in the spaces in the spaces of NAACP King County are elders in the community and have been in the spaces of marching and rallying and protesting. And I think that we could have done a better job with showing up for our youth that are out there advocating in the space, whether supporting or not. We still need to be in the space of showing up for them, because they are actually out there doing the work and trying to get something done. So I think that we could have done a better job, to be honest.
Well, what are your thoughts on, again, I've called it a paradigm shift in leadership. You have younger voices who are experiencing different things, and maybe for the first time in their lives are seeing some of the realities that I talked about earlier of systemic racism, and that with what we'll call, and what's called itself, the old guard. In how is there going to be trust built when you have a Generation Z that views the world differently than those who may have grown up during the modern era of the civil rights movement, as we begin to move forward and look towards leadership? How do you view this youth movement, and how do you reconcile or bring together or find value in all of the elements of folks who are fighting for the same thing?
I think that it works both ways, right? Our elders who I love dearly have a bigger manual than some of the younger folks in the community. However, I think that sometimes we get stagnant, and I think that the youth will always keep us moving forward. That's exactly why, I have some youth that I work with as the Black Student Union advisor at Rainier Beach, and they keep me on my toes. They are in the spaces of wanting to be active. And I think that what we need to continue to do is continue to water one another in the space of advocating for how can I put this? Advocating, protecting, and building this community. And we have to make sure that one of the things that I think has been missing for that is being inclusive. It's not just a Black man thing. This is, you know what I mean? I think that we have to make sure that we are Black women have been the matriarchs of a lot of great things that have happened in this community. And I think that there's been a lot of misogyny that's been in this space too. So I think that we have to be more inclusive on that. The homophobia, the transphobia, we can't state that we want to work together and cover the whole diaspora if we are not advocating for all Black and brown folks. So we need to make sure that we're cleaning inside the in-house before we can go out to the outhouse.
And Deaunte, quick question. I asked about the Seahawks. I asked about the Kraken. I'm going to ask you, sports. What do you think about the Seattle Mariners? They just keep losing and losing, but I don't know. What do you think? It doesn't stop me from being a Mariners fan.
Okay.
What do you think about the Mariners?
I'm going to be completely honest with you. I have not. I'm still calling ESPN ESPN. I do not really watch too much sports, and I haven't watched baseball since Ken Griffey. But what I suggest is, at the end of the day, I don't really have any thoughts on specifically the Mariners. But they keep losing, but they go out there and play. So I'll still root for them. And I think that, hey, that's one thing about life. You still go out there and try your best. And I think that, I would just love to go back to, when I do think about sports, I want to go back to the era when every person on the Mariners was like your hero. Edgar Martinez, Tino Martinez, Jay Buhner, Randy Johnson, Ken Griffey, and don't even ask me how I know all those players. Like my brother would be so proud of me right now. But I want to go back to that era when watching baseball was an event, and I remember a lot more of those people that were in the spaces of baseball were always in Seattle's public schools and surrounding.
All right. So, you're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio, our community election connection. Our guest is Deaunte Damper. If you've listened to me before, then I just have honest, open, frank conversation. Yes. That's not always comfortable for everybody. And my next question, Deaunte, has to deal with transparency. And because you were engaged with this, I'm bringing this up. And I'm not, and I have not drilled down on anybody. I've just given everybody the space to say whatever they want to say.
Absolutely.
But the purpose for having these conversations is to get the public the opportunity to find out who the candidates are.
Absolutely.
And after a period of time, I hadn't heard from the NAACP in a while. And then I heard from the NAACP because there was essentially a crisis in leadership. And Rainier Avenue Radio presented the opportunity for folks to get the word out because, again, transparency is very important. Why should, and you were part of that particular thing. I don't know whether that worked out for you or didn't work out for you, but you are running.
It worked out because I'm still here. I think.
Why should the community trust you to ensure that as a community, the NAACP will be transparent, the NAACP will be communicative, and good or bad, we'll get to find out what's happening, or we'll know what's happening with the organization that says itself it represents the community.
Absolutely. And thank you for asking the question. And you're absolutely right. Transparency is key. When I first joined this board, it was the president at the time to open up the space and put me on the space to be in the chair seat. There were a lot of things that were going on that I did not know, and I continue to do the work. In the midst of that, and I would like to thank the presidents prior, such as James Bible and Carl Mack, that started revealing our truths and needed us to be, because at the end of the day, we are a part of a legacy, and they held us accountable. And one of the things that I did not do in the spaces of when I first got on the board was read my bylaws and constitution, which is the most essential piece to our advocacy work. Once I owned that and started to actually see things for what they were, it was me, Deaunte Damper, that spoke to community during our membership meeting and owned these are the things that were wrong. This is what truth is not being told, and I do not stand for this. And that was off of the Constitution that I decided to study. At that point, things changed. I started being a person that affirmed in my bylaws, continued to hold the board accountable when we violate them. And most people that could have went through that situation some people would have considered to leave. I chose not to leave because I did not come there for my ego. I didn't come there for Sadiqa. I came there for community. I came there for the people that I've lost. I came there for the young queer community that hasn't had a voice in Seattle, King County, and NAACP. What would I look like leaving? And I think that even through that era, continuing to do the work, continuing to have conversations with people that reach out and ask for the truth and being completely honest shows exactly how resilient I am. And show that I can, leadership is about honesty as well. And I think that out of the candidates, that I would be the most qualified when it comes to the spaces of being resilient and honesty. So yes, I was there through that era. I don't wish bad on anyone that has left in the space. I wish them the best of luck, but I do want to continue to move forward in that space. So I hope that answers your question.
Right. It's your answers that I'm looking for. I'm also going to ask you to say something positive about your other two candidates.
Oh, wow. Okay. I do have some positive stuff to say. Carolyn Riley Payne, she is hands down one of the sweetest ladies that I've ever met. She is, what we can never take away is the years that she's put in to the AXO program, let alone her years on the board and her advocacy. When I first came in, there was a certain way that AXO was being ran. And what I loved about her is, even if I did something wrong, she's always been a great leader to pull you to the side to help you fix it, working together. I can honestly say, Carolyn has been a great matriarch for this organization. And I don't think that people have given her proper respect because she does have her own voice, but I really have a lot of respect for Ms. Payne. Definitely. And Erwin is definitely, he is definitely that balance that the NAACP has needed. He can be quiet at times, but over the past couple of months, it's very clear that he has sat back for too long, and he is ready. He is in the spaces of where he wants to step up into leadership, which I respect. Let alone working in the spaces with the 100 Black men and with the fire department. And he's also family friends with another family friend of mine. So I know that man has a very genuine heart. He's genuine and he's genuine in the things that he says. And I wish them both the best of luck in this space, but
And let me finish this off by giving you the opportunity for final words. Anything that you would like to share with our listeners and our audience.
Both of, first and foremost, Tony, thank you for letting me come here. Both candidates said something very important about making more room for other people. And when it comes down to me running and what is my why, because it's time. I've put in a lot of work in this organization by being visible, answering the hard questions, and following through. We continue to talk about the things that are impacting Seattle, but we fail to mention that we need to be talking about the diaspora of King County, Federal Way, Bellevue. Bellevue is an essential space of Bellevue and Redmond are an essential space where we need to be. We need to be out there protecting our Black Muslim brothers and sisters. We need to it's not just about Seattle public schools. It's the schools that are further south that we also need to make sure that we're paying attention to. over the past next couple of days, you will hear videos from me about why I'm running. And it's one thing, much respect to my other candidates, but it's one thing if you say you're going to be there, but it sure as hell makes a bigger impact when you show up. And one thing's for certain and two things for sure, Deaunte Damper shows up. And with your votes, I can be your next president of the NAACP. I just also want to add, before I end, NAACP has something going on right now. Freedom Funds Everyone. Please look at our website and check that out. Freedom Fund Chair Erica Conway has been putting this together, and it'll be running all the way until Friday. So please feel free to check that out.
Thank you, Mr. Damper. And again, this is Rainier Avenue Radio, your community election connection. We were going to have, and did have, candidates here to let them talk about themselves, to share that information. Unlike a debate situation where, you know, you're answering questions and you're kind of on the hot seat and you have 1 or 2 minutes to get your answers out there, I thought that it was important that we shared some space for our candidates to talk about who they were. I have invited the representative of the NAACP to share this space with our community. I have not had a response back. Again, you know how I get in. Well, I've got a response back, but it wasn't, we're coming on the radio station.
Oh, wow.
This was just, and so, but that hasn't happened. Maybe it will happen. Hasn't happened yet. We have a debate planned for Friday. And again, it is essential, I think, for our community. First of all, a lot of people didn't even know that there was an election for the presidency of the NAACP. Most people weren't aware of that. And we've tried to draw awareness to that because, again, as our communities continue to face threats, unanticipated challenges, from whatever comes next, whether that be COVID-19, the next virus or pandemic comes through, the next case of social injustice, the next case of racial injustice, we need to know who the resources are, who the organizations are, who the people are who are charged with and have accepted the responsibility of advocating on our behalf. And so we have a debate scheduled for 1 o'clock that initially all of the candidates agreed to. And we're going to have that debate, and we'll see who shows up. At that point, of course, we're going to ask more questions. Of course, we're going to have moderators who will ask questions that are relevant and important. And I did not want to intrude on this process by asking those questions when I was giving candidates space to share who they were. Well, on Friday, it's Reckoning Day. That is the day our community will be waiting to hear from the candidates. And if there is a belief that somehow there are things that are taking place that do not allow you to talk to your community about incidents, about things that have happened, well, that's going to be on whoever it is. But one of the questions I've asked all of our candidates is about transparency. I've asked all of our candidates about things that have gone on in our community, whether you've agreed with their answers or whether you thought that their answers were right up your alley, whether you thought that their answers were shallow and not indicative of the leadership that you are looking for, or disconnected. They were allowed to present their opinions and their thoughts and their ideas. Well, on Friday at 1 o'clock, right here on Rainier Avenue Radio, we will be hosting a debate. I cannot make people come to the debate. And for those who can't make it to the debate, I'm assuming that we'll get some sort of reason why. But the community is not stupid. We are simply a voice and a vehicle as a media organization being responsive to the needs of our community. And if we can get the governor, if we can get the state attorney general, if we can get Supreme Court justice candidates, if we can get Superior Court justice candidates, if we can get Congress folks who are running to be in D.C., if we can get legislative folks who are running for our communities, then I think that we should be able to get people who are running for the presidency of the NAACP to come on and talk to our community, in particular because so many things we don't know about that are only leaking out, and we should find out who people are and what we can expect for their leadership. So that's about it. We will be back at 1 o'clock on Friday. All 3 candidates have been invited to show up. I'm not going to mention anything else, but we will be here at 1 o'clock on Friday, and we're asking our community to join us. We'll have students who will be here to ask questions of the NAACP as youth who have questions of the NAACP that they would like answered. We'll have moderators who will be here to ask questions on behalf of the community. We have several organizations who support this. And in the interest of transparency, we'll see what happens. And what I'm hoping for is that on Friday, we'll have a conversation and we will have the candidates for presidency of the NAACP show up to answer those questions. Now, maybe some folks think that's not the best way to do it, but if you're on the outside telling us to wait until you've decided how you want this to work out is not transparency. You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio. It's me, Tony B. This is your community election connection. We're going to return you to our regularly scheduled programming. We will be back at 1 o'clock on Friday for a debate with the candidates for presidency of the NAACP. Thank you for joining us, and we're going to now return you to our regularly scheduled programming.